I like to bike, but I love to run. So it's a matter of, finding the proper people to give you the correct diagnosis as to what is actually going on in your body, what's dysfunctional, and how can that be addressed, and then going out and doing it. Because whether you're 20 or whether you're 60 or beyond, if you like to run, you want to make it part of your lifestyle. And part of that is we all like to run fast, but you can't run fast every day. And there's nothing like being on the shelf for, a day, a week, a month, a year, to make you really understand that most of us run because we, derive joy from it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ultra Running Summit Series. I'm your host, Eric Brummel, and my guest today is Cam Parliament. Cam is a massage therapist and marathoner hailing from Winnipeg, Manitoba, and he has in-depth knowledge of anatomy, physiology, and the human body and what it takes to run not only marathons, but longer distances, and what kind of effect that will have in the long term as we progress through life. So thank you, Cam, for spending some time with me, and thank you for being here today. It's truly a pleasure to talk with you.
I'm looking forward to it.
So what's on your radar at the current moment? Did you have a busy schedule over the last few weeks in the new year?
I've been busy, and actually this is week 1 of my marathon training plan for the Manitoba Marathon.
Oh, excellent.
So, I'm excited to be sort of diving into a specific 18-week plan and looking for some warmer weather with which to execute it.
Yeah, that one's in June, right? Manitoba's?
Yeah, it's on Father's Day.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I've run the half there before. It's a nice race. It's very much like the Chicago Marathon, very flat.
Flat with fewer people.
Yeah, I ran a marathon like that actually out here in Delta, BC last autumn. It's notoriously flat, but it reminded me a lot of the Manitoba race there too. Yeah, Winnipeg will be cold this time of year. So do you train a lot on the treadmills?
I do both at this time of year. So if I'm doing a bit of interval type work, I'll definitely hit the treadmill for that.
Cool. Yeah, I'm not much of a treadmill guy myself. I don't love it. I tend to hit the exercise bike more often than the treadmill, to be honest.
Yeah, I just find for myself, the plan I'm using specifically calls for intervals. So better safe than sorry.
Yeah, exactly. It's better to just have time on foot rather than cross training or doing some other sport, because really that can help strengthen you, but it doesn't necessarily prep you for a marathon or any kind of running race.
Yeah, muscle specific.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about running injuries and typical running injuries. If you don't mind getting it right into that. I mean, have you ever had any major injuries yourself, or any major setbacks in your training or on race day?
Not on race day, but I guess my major setback was some problems with my left knee. As a younger person, I had a open meniscus. I can't even say that. Basically, a bunch of meniscus removed from my left knee, not scoped, but opened up and scooped a bunch out.
Ooh.
So it's sort of been the weak link in my kinetic chain, and I basically, much like other people out there, probably looked around, even though I'm a massage therapist, to find the right therapist to properly diagnose what was going on with the knee, and then get me back into running shape. So that's certainly been my current piece, but all the treatments went exceptionally well, and I'm back at her.
And was that a running injury originally that affected your knee, or was it from something else?
I'll save the names to protect the guilty, but I actually had a very bad treatment post a race, and just negatively affected my body.
Oh, darn. So was that sorry, what?
No, please go ahead.
I was just going to say, was that before you made a life choice to get into massage therapy, or was that after? And was massage therapy kind of a result from that injury?
Not a result of that injury, no. That injury was when I was in my late teens.
Okay.
So I've had many years and many miles on that knee. So, although people, I think, tend to limit themselves if they've had an injury.
Mm-hmm.
So, although I don't have a lot of meniscus in one knee, I run, well, I'm sure, thousands of miles and, marathons, half marathons, and all that good stuff, and continue to go.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, as an example, I'm 53, and that original injury happened at 19.
Yeah, so you just accommodate that part of your life, and you train not around it, but you train to reinforce that as your weak spot. Is that correct?
Yeah, I know it's my weak spot, and I train accordingly.
Yeah, okay. That's great. That's the way to do it. I mean, you don't want to focus entirely on strengths, especially in that case. I think a lot of people get caught up in focusing on strengths sometimes. And in schools too, I think the school system tends to say like, oh, well, you're good at this, you should do this because it's your strength. But then people don't always get in their minds that necessity to focus on sort of balancing yourself.
Balance yourself mentally and physically. You bet.
Yeah. Do you think the knees would be, or the hips would probably be the culprit for most likely to be damaged in a lifelong career of running, or do you think that would go to a different muscle group? Or
Well, I would tell you, people walking into my clinic, you hear, the common complaints from people who are runners are, knee pain, plantar fasciitis, pain in the iliotibial band,
mm-hmm.
Glute pain, which often it's explained as, hip pain when they walk into the clinic, and shin splints.
Mm.
So I would say those are the top ones that walk into my clinic.
Yeah. I've dealt with the IT band, and I found it was just a matter of learning how to stretch it out properly. But I could see how especially plantar fasciitis and knee injuries can create a compounding effect, whereby people might have improper treatment once, or maybe they sort of just brush it under the rug as just like something they don't need to tend to, and then it gets worse and it gets worse and it gets re-injured. And so if people aren't taking the time to properly to seek the help that they need, then those injuries can compound.
Yep. And also, I think, lots of us tend to have those thoughts where we go to the worst thought first in our minds. So, like, as an example with knees, certainly people do injure their knees, but quite often it's not the knee itself that is the problem. It's the musculature and connective tissue around the knee. Mm-hmm. So, and that certainly can be addressed. So, and that's what I find with a lot of people. It's where is the dysfunction in your body? Mm-hmm. And that's why I would never say there's one. I mean, you always hear people who don't run say, oh, you're going to ruin your knees, things of that nature. Mm-hmm. But, what tends to happen with most people is the typical running too far, too fast, too quick. And, as we begin to fatigue, our form begins to go. And then wherever we're weak in our particular kinetic chain, that's where we're going to start the compensation. So, mm-hmm. That iliotibial band problem, you might have some pain, towards the lateral aspect of your, towards your knee, but the issue's probably further up the hip, mm-hmm. posture issue, dropping the hip during your run as you fatigue, things of that nature.
Right. Or even just not balancing your spine properly and kind of having a shoulder tilt can lean you on one hip versus the other.
Yep, there's a million and one things too. And I always think, people, will think spine, but at the end of the day, your bones aren't contractile. So it's really, as you say, whether it's your head is tilted, your shoulder is tilted, and it could be, forward flexed, it could be rotated. And usually it's a combination of all the above.
Mm-hmm. And usually it ties back to the musculature, like you were saying, the bones are the way that they are, and the muscles are really the ones that move them.
Yeah, your bones are, I like to think of it as floating in space, thinking of your body in more of a 3D situation.
Mm-hmm. What do you think is the best strategy for people seeking to avoid injuries then? And I mean, obviously we could just say stop running altogether. But I
I
think,
would never say that.
yeah, but I mean, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, well, do you stop the activity that's causing the damage, or do you find more effective ways to do the activity to avoid the damage?
Um, I would tell you I like to think of it more of a lifestyle. People who like to run.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly, as I was doing some rehab on my knee, I jumped on my bicycle, and it's one of those, I like to bike, but I love to run. So it's a matter of, finding the proper people to give you the correct diagnosis as to what is actually going on in your body, what's dysfunctional, and how can that be addressed,
Mm-hmm.
and then going out and doing it. Because whether you're 20 or whether you're 60 or beyond, if you like to run, you want to make it part of your lifestyle. And part of that is, we all like to run fast, but you can't run fast every day. And there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing like being on the shelf for a day, a week, a month, a year, to make you really understand that most of us run because we derive joy from it.
Mm-hmm.
So I would tell you, lots of long, slow miles, and then building in with some your typical speed and strength work as well.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on barefoot running? Do you think that would lead to fewer injuries, or what do you think the role that shoes play with regard to injuries is?
Well, that is a loaded question.
Yeah.
Um, I would tell you, the thing about shoes. I mean, I certainly run in shoes for any kind of long distance.
Yeah, me
Uh,
too.
However, the thing is, I've been wearing shoes for most of my life. So, although, I actually work in, Vibram Five Fingers, and
Okay,
I,
cool.
and I certainly do a lot of my walking that way, um, or Hirachi sandals, things of that nature.
Yep.
But most of us, because we've been wearing shoes for most of our life, our intrinsic foot muscles just aren't strengthened.
Mm.
So, that's when people tend to hurt themselves going into barefoot running. They just haven't actually built up the stamina in their feet.
Yeah.
And again, I would say the challenge with running in shoes are it really masks some of the issues we have with our foot strike.
Mm-hmm.
Could probably talk all day about whether you're a heel, midfoot, or forefoot strike of your foot, but I would tell you, shoes, they mask some of our issues. And lots of people, they like to run with headphones and whatnot, which also disassociates yourself from your gait,
Yeah.
from the discomfort you may or may not be feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think it's really more a matter of being present in your run and understanding where you are in time and space, if that doesn't sound too crazy.
That doesn't sound crazy at all to me, because I'm all about that. Like I took out the headphones miles and miles ago, and I've recently started going into the barefoot thing. Just on warmer days, I've been taking my shoes off for a mile or two.
Yeah.
I don't notice huge gains from it yet, but there is that aspect of mindfulness and awareness that I'm just trying to cultivate. I'm curious if you do any meditation or other mental exercises to help you train for marathons.
Oh, yeah, I would say I'm not perfect, but if I could meditate every day, I'm certainly a happier person. So I
Yeah.
wouldn't say that just as part of running per se, but just, again, lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. And I just, a lot of people too will say like running is meditative, so they're kind of one and the same. Um, I like to I like to have mine separate, just so that there is that um, separateness from them, where I can hone in entirely on the mind for a short interval of time.
Yeah, there's there's certainly walking meditation, but much like you, I separate the two things,
Mm-hmm.
and I get a different get different benefits from each.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing I noticed with the barefoot running was I'd spoken to a yoga instructor because I was having some IT band pain,
Mm-hmm.
and so she was the one who kind of suggested to me like, oh, like maybe it's starting with your feet, and I was like, that's kind of something I had never considered before. And then I started stretching out all of these little muscles and bones and stuff in my feet, and I noticed my hips and my knees kind of like some tension eased up there, and then the barefoot running became easier, and it just kind of snowballed. I'm curious to know what you think about different channels of the body's muscles and energies being based in the feet. Are you familiar with those sort of pathways that kind of begin at the feet and go all the way up the spine?
I am. I would give you a slightly different thought on, without delving really, really deep into the physiology.
Okay.
There's a number of different types of mechanoreceptors in your body. You know, Golgi tendon organs, Ruffini's, Pacini's, interstitial 3s and 4s. Suffice it to say that around the periosteum of all your bones, they're very rich in specific mechanoreceptors. And if you access those, they can have a global effect in your body, stimulate your autonomic and central nervous systems. So quite often when you're working through your feet and getting some of that shear on your periosteum, I would tell you that's giving you a global effect in your body.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm familiar too with the idea in Chinese medicine that a lot of bad qi kind of goes through the feet too, and that's kind of how it escapes the body. I had somebody else tell me that, and it just kind of got me into this whole thinking of the interconnectedness between the back and the legs and the feet, and how there's sort of like a long chain that kind of creates the musculature for the body and the way that we run.
Yeah, actually, something you might want to look into. There's a gentleman by the name of Thomas Myers, who's somewhat renowned in the body work and beginning into the yoga field as well. Is an anatomist, and he's got something like one of his books is called Anatomy Trains, and you can see his posters online, and they're actually worth purchasing because it will give you a sense of the interconnectedness of your connective tissue that goes throughout the body. He also has a number of videos, dissection videos as well, if you can handle those types of things, that will actually show you how, as an example, from the base of your feet, your plantar aspect of your feet, all the way up through, say, your calves, your hamstrings, in through the sacrum, up through the erectors of the back, and actually insert right into the back of your skull, or actually a little bit higher than the back of your skull. And that's really all within your body, all one connected piece.
Wow.
So, yeah,
that's fascinating. What was his name? Thomas
Myers.
Thomas Myers. Okay, thanks. I'll definitely look that up.
Yeah, Thomas Myers, Anatomy Trains. Lots of good stuff there.
Yeah. I think the muscles in the back especially play a very subtle but necessary role in long distance running, and in many things in life too. I'm sure you see lots of that in your practice. I'm curious to know though, if you think there's one section of the back that's typically like sustains more abuse from running than another section, or if there's sort of a typical exercise that could strengthen the back overall.
Usually the issue most of us have with our back is that our and again, there's so many different, like when you say back muscles, there are many muscles in the back.
Yeah.
And I think most of us The ones that tend to jump out are, I would say, the erectors. So muscles that run from more or less from your sacrum, from your ilia, all the way up to your head. So basically muscles that allow you to stand erect.
Mm-hmm.
Because almost everything that we do is in front of us. We tend to all be, whether our head is forward flexed, or whether we're hunched over our computers or hunched over our dinner.
Mm-hmm.
So all those natural movements that we do lengthen those muscles in the back. And most of us tend to hunch forward, just beginning, say, beneath where our scapula ends.
Okay, so that's about the mid back, right?
Yeah, mid back. So you're sort of your mid thoracic area.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like, think of an elastic band. If it's not stretched very far, it seems very, very strong. You can push on it with no ill effects. However, if you lengthen that elastic band and begin to push on it, you go, gee, I sure would hate to break that elastic band. An oversimplification of how those erectors are. So usually the term you might hear is an eccentric load is placed on that lengthened muscle.
Mm.
Right. So I really don't like thinking of any specific muscle group in isolation, because you need a strong core, your obliques, transverse abdominis, etc., working in concert with your back erector muscles.
Mm-hmm.
So if one is overpowering the other, it's not going to be functional.
Right. Yeah, and then there is that whole interconnectedness. So like if one is overpowering the other, then you're going to have a problem that will result, and that problem might be unique to you because another person might have the exact opposite problem of a different muscle overpowering that one.
Yep, we are all unique with both our strengths and our opportunities, as some would say.
Yeah, I noticed for me anyway, I had some back strength issues in one of my last races. I just wasn't able to stand upright for the entire distance, and so I came across the finishing line just like flopping around like a wet spaghetti, and my knees and mostly my hips took a decent beating as a result of it. Like, I don't want to say that I really damaged myself, because I wasn't in a cast or anything like that, but yeah, I definitely noticed that my back strength wasn't where it needed to be.
Yes, and having not seen you, but one of the things that would jump out to my mind is, from a postural perspective, what were your hips like? Because quite often you get a bit of a forward tilt in your hips as you begin to tire.
Okay.
Right, which will then create issues both above and below.
Right, because then below you're kind of tilted back, and above you're tilted forward. So then it creates like a Z shape in your body almost.
Yep, it can. And then also a lot of us too tend to favor one leg more than the other. So you may have more, also might be dipping from one side more than the other.
Mm-hmm.
There's a diagnosis without even seeing you.
Yeah, that is dangerous. Thankfully, I'm through the recovery of it though, and I've been doing lots to strengthen my back this winter. So I'm hoping that will come into play this summer.
Nice.
What kind of exercises do you do for like strength training for running? If you could say like 3 or 5 of the most essential exercises you do.
I don't know if I'm doing the correct ones, but for me it would be, I always like to do push-ups, planks, and both, regular planks, side planks, bridges, and squats and one leg deadlifts.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I do a lot of the same ones too. I have a weekly, or not a weekly, but I have a set of 7 or 8 exercises that I try to do a couple of times a week, at least, just to build some strength.
Nice. Yeah.
Plank work, I think, is really essential.
Yeah, on this, I know they work for me.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of one of the funny things about running too, is that whatever works for you is what works for you, and there's no guarantee that it'll work for the person next to you. Would you
Yep.
agree, or do you think that's...
Well, I think some of the basic ones, like we've just spoke about, they will work for everybody. They may need some other exercises to focus on their own specific dysfunction, but all of those things we spoke about would work for, I think, most of the population.
Very cool. Do you find yourself you're a very habit-oriented person, Cam?
Yep.
Yeah?
Absolutely.
Me too. What habits do you rely on a daily basis? Like, are there 3 that you need to do every day, or 5 that you have to do every day in order for your state of mind to be sort of where you want it to be?
Well, I mean, I would say at least 5 minutes of meditation every day, minimally. I would also say some form of aerobic activity. Clearly, mostly running, but there's that. And really trying to be, I would say, the act of just general gratitude.
Very good one, yeah.
Being grateful for what I'm able to do, and grateful for the great people that surround me.
Yeah, those are all excellent habits. I've got a fascination with habits lately, and the habits that people use to not only get themselves through the day, but really, really take charge and own the life that they want to live. So kudos to you and props to you for your habits.
Thank you.
Do you drink coffee? Are you a caffeine person?
I do drink coffee, absolutely.
Okay, cool. Yeah, caffeine's one that people are all over the map about too. Sometimes some people are totally anti-caffeine and other people are all about the caffeine. I find myself somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a ton of bad habits, but coffee brings me joy.
There's no bad habit.
Yeah, and I guess actually the other habit that I've been executing over the last probably 8 months, which has been exceptionally beneficial for myself, would be intermittent fasting.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, like a 30-hour famine or like a 20-hour?
No, I do the, every day being 24 hours, it's minimally 16 hours consecutive with no food.
Right, okay.
Basically a eating window of 8 hours or less every day.
Right. So you sleep for, say, 9 hours, and then 3 hours before you go to bed, you're not eating, and then how many hours is that?
Yeah,
couple hours after you wake up too.
Yeah, if I oversimplified it, my window is from noon till 8.
Okay.
I don't always start eating at noon, but that kind of gives me the flexibility. If I want to meet somebody for lunch, I can. If I want to meet somebody for dinner, I can. But yeah, I actually just came back for my yearly physical, and my doctor was quite impressed with the results. So
right on. Yeah, I've read a decent amount about fasting lately, and what got me onto it originally is that I found out that most Buddhist monks don't eat dinner.
Yep.
So they eat breakfast and they'll eat lunch, and that's their window.
Yep.
And yeah, it's a lifestyle choice that I think a lot of people have maybe blocked out in the modern world, or just kind of moved away from.
Well, I can tell you, A, it makes me feel great, and B, it's also really cost effective.
Yeah, there you go. And I mean, longevity too. It's one of those habits that will pay dividends later in life too. Like as you age, it's one of those habits that will continue to show noticeable effects in your health.
I would tell you, so far so good on my end.
Okay, cool.
You had mentioned you were doing 2 trail races.
Yeah.
Or that's what your plan is for the first half of 2018. So I would be interested to know what your training regimen is over the course of a week?
Yeah, but my weeks kind of vary. Some weeks I'm doing 20 miles, other weeks I'm doing 40 miles, but typically I'm factoring in like one speed work or hill work day, and then one really long run of like 3 or 4 hours, and then one tempo run of about 8 or 9 miles where I'm just kind of running at my race pace. And then shorter runs are mixed in too. And if it's really raining hard, then I'll go to the gym instead of my run, and I'll just ride the exercise bike for a little while. And then I've got just these exercises I'm trying to do 2-3 times a week. So it's variable. My weeks some weeks are boom weeks, others are bust weeks. I really need to get some consistency in my schedule, I think.
Do you have a specific plan, whether it's 16, 18 weeks out or from the race? Are you following a specific plan?
No, I'm not actually. I'm just kind of cobbling it together myself, and I'm trying to use the information from these interviews to really hone in on specifics. Because for my first ultras, I'm just kind of taking a marathon training plan I've used in the past and adapting it slightly. It might seem a little oversimplified, but I just figure that this is a 30-mile race, so there's 4 miles more than my marathon distance. So I'm just kind of going based on what worked in the past and then adding in more hill work and uphills and downhills.
And has your nutrition changed at all?
Oh, hugely. Yeah. I'm experimenting with more of like a ketosis kind of state where I train eating mostly fats beforehand and then eat carbohydrates afterwards. And so far it's working decently well for me. It just, it's one of those things that might pay off on race day because I won't have to eat so many like carbohydrates throughout the race. I'll just be able to sustain myself more on fat.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So what's your nutrition plan like? Do you have specific diet that you follow? Are you paleo or vegetarian at all?
Yeah, I definitely a plant-based diet, have been for years.
Okay. Do you like enable yourself to eat meat products ever? Or like, I know at marathons and especially at all kinds of races, really, lots of people are big on chicken broth. Even vegetarians I've heard say chicken broth is a go-to.
No, I don't. I would have from no meat products whatsoever. I would probably let a little bit of honey and occasionally some milk from some cheese get into my diet. But other than that, it's pretty strictly plant-based.
Right on. Kudos to you for that, because I do the same, and I'm sort of in the throes of cutting out things like honey and butter, and that's where I notice the difficulties.
Yeah, and I mean, ultimately, that's what makes me feel good. I know there's other people who that would not work for at all. So, I'm really big on listening to your body and what makes your body feel good, and run with it.
Mm-hmm. Do you have exercises for checking in with your body and your mind, and just like perhaps maybe in meditation, is there something you do just to sort of check in on a daily basis?
I guess the meditation is part of it, but also over the years, I've done a number of food diaries.
Okay.
So I just, kind of give myself the chance to say, write down what you're eating, then write down how you feel, and just put it together.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of what I've done for my training nutrition, like more so what I'm eating with regards to when I'm running. I just kind of jot down notes of like, this made me feel good, or like this made me feel ill. I don't do it for every meal yet, but maybe I should.
Yeah, I can tell you I pretty much food journaled for about a solid year.
Okay.
Which just gave me a chance to do some, exclusion types of diets, just to say, well, I think that may have affected me, so let me take it out of the diet, see if that makes a difference, and then put it back in. And if I feel bad again, it's like, aha, that particular thing doesn't work for me. I'll move on to a different food source.
Yep, the square peg in the circle hole, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I've one of the biggest things I noticed was dairy. When I went no dairy, going back to the other side was like painful. Like, do you
And
find
again,
what's that?
no, please go ahead.
I was just going to say, do you find that there's something that you miss maybe from your non-plant-based diet that you don't have anymore?
Not really, because again, I went through the process of figuring out what makes my body feel good. So, if there's something like bacon, it was really the salt that I was liking, not so much the bacon. But I would tell you, it's been somewhere between 8 and 10 years of a plant-based diet, and I've never woken up in the morning saying, I really wish I could have had X, Y, or Z. I'm quite satisfied with what I'm doing.
Yeah, and that's whatever makes you feel good. Just run with it, right?
Yep, happy and healthy.
Right on. That's a great way to live the life. Truly living the dream life in that way. Happy and healthy. You can't have much more to wish for.
Nope.
Yeah. So Manitoba Marathon is 18 weeks away now, or 17 weeks away?
Thursday, so what's it, 17 weeks and 3 days?
Okay. Right on. And are you following a plan that you've followed before, or is this sort of like a new area you're getting into? And what's your goal with this race? Are you trying to get a PR?
I'm using the Hanson Marathon method.
Okay, yeah.
That's the last marathon I ran. I used that method, and it really worked well for me. Specifically, the day after the race, I felt like $1,000,000 and had minimal soreness. So that was enough to make me say, I'm going to try that one again. And the number one goal is to cross the start and finish line healthy. That is by far the number one goal. And then my secondary goal is, as long as I'm 3 hours and under 4 hours, that's my goal. I want to be under 4 hours, and I'll be a happy boy.
Right on. That's phenomenal. And what shoes are you planning on wearing for this? Do you have a brand that you go to?
Yeah, I'm going to be using ASICS Nimbus for this particular training cycle.
Cool. Yeah, I used to be an ASICS runner myself. Like, I'm not on the team or anything, but I used to swear by them, and I recently made the switch to La Sportiva.
Which I think would be good for some of the trail type stuff you're doing too.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about finding the right shoe that feels good for the right terrain, and then you run with it.
Exactly.
Well, best of luck to you in your training process and on race day, Cam. And thanks for all of the information you shared with me today. This chat's really been amazing, in my opinion. I've learned a lot. Thank you very much for your time. And I just wish you the best of luck in your running season and in your year and in all that you do.
Well, thank you very much, Eric, and I wish you the same, and I think I will live vicariously through you as you're running through the mountains.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'll try to take more pictures in that way then. Peace be with you, brother.
And to you as well.